Morning. Before we begin, can I ask senators, is it agreed to allow communications to take photos during our hearing this morning? Agreed. Thank you. So I see we have quorum, so we will begin. Honorable senators, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. And for those of you following on Facebook Live, as we continue our discussion on the issues relating to the human rights of prisoners in the correctional system. Today's meeting will focus on the experiences of Black people in federal prisons as we honor Black History Month. Before we begin, I would like all senators to introduce themselves, and we will begin on my right.
Salma Taulachan from Toronto, Ontario.
And I'm Jane Cordy. I'm from Nova Scotia. Welcome.
And Kim Pate from Ontario, and I just want to take this opportunity. It's Valentine's Day, and one of the histories of Valentine's Day is that one of the first Valentine's card was apparently sent by a prisoner to a warden's, or a priest or a warden's. So I think it's appropriate that we're studying prisoners' human rights as on Valentine's Day, and the first Valentine's card was actually sent by a prisoner. So thank you. Sorry for that very long introduction.
Thanks, Kim. Nancy Hartling from New Brunswick. Welcome. Welcome.
And I'm Wanda Thomas-Bernard, Chair of the committee, and I'm from Nova Scotia. So for our first panel today, we are pleased to welcome by video conference Teresa Halfkenny, who's from the Regional Ethnocultural Advisory Committee, and she is the chair of the Atlantic Region for Correctional Services Canada. Now, I want to just alert everyone that we actually may have some technical problems. There are some problems with the sound, and so if we'll try our best. We'll start with you, Ms. Halfkenny, and then we're going to hear from Natalie Charles. If we're not able to continue today because of the sound, we will reschedule you for another time. But we will start, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to present to the committee today. I am the chairperson of the Regional Ethnocultural Advisory Committee in the Atlantic Region.
I'm sorry.
And on our committee,
sorry, Ms. Halfkenny, I'm so sorry, but they are unable to do the translation, so we will not be able to take your testimony today. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I'm so sorry about this.
Oh, that is okay.
So we will.
Technology.
Yes, it's wonderful when it works. So it's a problem with translation, and so we cannot proceed if the translators cannot hear. So we will be in touch with you to reschedule you.
Okay.
Okay.
That sounds good.
If she just hold on 1 second, let me confer with the clerk for a second.
She can stay on the screen and watch her.
So if you want to and have the time to stay on the screen and listen to Ms. Charles and her presentation, you're welcome to do that.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay, thank you. So we're very pleased. We're very pleased for our second speaker that you're actually here early and that you'll be able to speak to us now. And so we are pleased to have Miss Natalie Charles joining us here in Ottawa. She's going to speak to us about her experiences as a person who has been a prisoner in the federal system. And she is supported by Ms. Sophia Brown-Ramsey, whom we met last week when we were in Kitchener. And she's also with the Ethnocultural Advisory Committee in the Ontario region. So, Ms. Charles, we will invite you now to share with us, and I know that you want to talk with us about your story, your experience, and then senators will have questions. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Natalie Charles, and I am from Toronto. And I just want to share my unique story with you because I have been involved with the young offenders. I was a young offender, and I was also charged as an adult as well. So my story is a little bit different. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I got involved with sorry, I'm just a little nervous.
That's okay.
So my voice is a bit shaky, but I was involved with the law at a very young age. Roughly, it could have been maybe 14 years old, 13, 14 years old, and it went up until I was about in my mid-20s. Now, as a young offender, I was very foolish. I had a boyfriend, and he did his things, and I ended up getting myself into problems as a result of fighting and just being disobedient. As an adult now, what had happened was I had ended up getting myself involved with some things that I shouldn't have done, which also led me to being incarcerated as well. Being incarcerated, it's a balance of both. It taught me both positive and negative. The people, starting with the positive, it doesn't, like with it being positive, you don't want to go back in there. You don't want to disappoint your family, disappoint yourself. The negative aspect of it is that you meet other people that are either involved in what you are, or worse than what you are actually involved in. So then you start making like connections with other people that are actually inside of the jail, which is not a good thing. Also, with the I find that there's a lot of like there was a lot of racism, there was a lot of violence, there was a lot of deception that was inside of just the jail system itself, where like if they knew that you came from a certain area or they didn't like you, they would put you on a certain cell to allow you to get yourself hurt. There's so many things. There's just what else is there to say? There's so much. What it taught me, most importantly, is that this is just having a life of getting in trouble is not the way to be. It's not good. I am 39 years old, and I'm struggling right now. This criminal record of mine is like a cloud over my head that cannot seem to go away. I try everything in my power. Like right now, I'm currently enrolled in the paralegal program, and I'm going to be done in April. I have put a pardon in prior to this time here. I put a pardon in, and it was actually, I waited 5 years to hear something back. When I did, it wasn't great news, unfortunately. However, it didn't stop me. I reapplied again, and I have another year, which is going to be coming in August, for me to hear something. Right now, I'm nerve-wracked. I have placement that's coming up. My record is a huge damper in it, because the placements that I want are all government ran, and they all want criminal record check. I feel like I'm blocked. I'm stopped. But the way I look at it, wherever there's a will, there's a way. So I'm trying my best now to, overcome my past, because my past has really affected my future. When you think that you're okay, it's this, the fact of the record, the criminal record. It's a huge effect on people's lives. And I wish that there was some either programs that were available, like let's say to like young offenders. I remember when I was younger, they had an African Canadian court worker that used to come, And it was a little different, well, quite different from, let's say, the John Howard Society or the Elizabeth Fry Society, which was more geared towards like my culture, and they would help us with more extent than what Howard Johnson would do, because Howard Johnson, let's say, had a list of dockets that they had to go through. So if it was 30 people that were inside, they had the 30 people to speak with. Whereas the African Canadian court worker just addressed our community. So we got more time with them, more time to explain like what was going on, more time for them to help us to find either sureties or, you know, things that we calling for your lawyer, things like that. I had it's a lot. It's like I had, when I was incarcerated, my sister was actually maybe 2 years old, and that's what had me turn my life around. I did not want to have my sister coming to this type of environment, seeing me locked up, seeing me just in a dark place in my life. And it's, you know, I've learned a lot. I can smile now with you guys now because I've come so far, and I want so much more out of life. And I really hope that there's something that could be put in place for, you know, African Canadians, that we can have a little more support with, like, you know, even like support in all different areas, like you know, there's time, like even support in the school systems to let people know that like, you know, the effect of a criminal record and what it can cause to you, like you know, because we're already like racially profiled, as you could, like, you know, every day that we live, whether your pants are sagging down, you're already in this category, this stigma. So it's like, it would be nice to have somebody to educate our community a little bit more on what, you know, we should, like where you want to go, goals. Just to give you a little touch, when I started getting myself involved with criminal activity, I had a guidance counselor actually, and I told my guidance counselor that I wanted to become a lawyer. And my guidance counselor at that point told me, oh, well, you're a little bit old and you're pregnant, maybe you should just do ECE. So at that point, it kind of derailed me, and I was just like, oh, well, I don't have a goal now. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm going to do. And it was just being more lost, getting involved more in the law now, because I didn't have a goal. I didn't have anything that I was looking forward to. So having a support system in place, I think for youths is very important. For adults, I think there should be some form of rehabilitation program that should be put in place. Like, I haven't been in trouble. My son is 11 years old. I haven't been in trouble in maybe 15 years. And I would love to be rehabilitated, or considered to be rehabilitated, considered to be bondable. And I'm not at this point. It's a waiting game for me. It's just, you know, my future lies on this. My mother had passed away nearly 10 years ago. I am the sole provider for my family. And my sister I had to take care of my sister since she was 15. So my son was a month and a half and my daughter was 10. And I when my mom passed away, it was more than just, you know, it's time for you to step up to the plate, but it's very important for me to do this because they rely so much on me. And I need a break. I'm not the same person that I was you know, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. I'm a completely different person. And I wish that there was even something that was available so that you could go and speak, maybe, show what you've done in the community to give back, that you would be considered to be rehabilitated, or like anything along the line that you can be considered to be, you know, a good citizen.
Thank you so much, Ms. Charles, for your testimony today. Now the senators do have some questions, and so we'll start with Senator Atulajan, followed by Senator Cordy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Charles, for sharing your story with us. And I think you've done very well. I mean, you know, 15 years. since we've started this study, we are realizing things need to change. We need more help, and support for young offenders, especially once they leave prison. Last week, when we visited the women's prison, we heard horrible stories of racism, and including name calling by some of the stuff that I will not even repeat. Was that your experience too?
Oh, if you do stuff that like they don't like, or let's say you're mouthy or you stand up for yourself, that's considered like you're being defiant. So then you have this name or you have this stigma that you're defiant, and then all the other guards now have it out for you. And if they're not calling you names, like derogatory names, it's like they all will come in and like fight you. Like let's say in the washroom or in your cell, mainly they come into your cell because sometimes you're put one person to the room, so they'll come in to your room and literally like it's 2, 3 of them, 4 of them, and fight you, and then you're being charged or you're being considered obstructing justice, and then you're being put to SAG, to solitary. Like you have to be by yourself, and like that's happened to me. That's happened to me quite a few times, and it was where I was just trying to defend myself in terms of I had nothing to do with anything, and I was just trying to tell my side of the story, but I guess I was loud, or I came across as being loud or belligerent, and that's when and then I ended up in SAG.
So we also heard that a lot of the experience was that if they complained, there were repercussions.
Oh yeah.
So effectively, nobody wanted to complain.
Yeah.
Was that
well, if you can't complain, because if you complain, it just goes around in a circle. It's similar to like the police, right? If you have a complaint, you have to complain to the basically the sergeant, and then when you go there, they've opened up now an OPRC or something where you can complain to the people that are above them, but it's still the police that handle your case. So how does that make me feel secure? Is there anything that's, if there was something, an independent body that was outside of the court or outside of the jail system that was handling it, that didn't have anything to do with them, sure, you would probably hear tons of complaints, but you're afraid because then remember, they're responsible. Your life is in their hands. So you have to comply. You can't complain.
Was there any kind of support system there? Was there anyone who was like at this time when you felt you were really alone? Was there anyone that you could rely on? Was there a group? Is there any kind of support available?
Nope, there's none at all. No support systems, no like counseling systems. Even if you call the doctor, like let's say you get injured and you call the doctor or the nurse, or it's a nurse that's in there, and the nurse comes, they're also limited to what they could say, or like like if you get if you end up getting beat up and they have to cover the wounds now of what they did to you, it's where you can't say anything because it's very limited. It's very, very limited. Like there's no support system. There's nobody to say, well, what happened? Are you okay? Well, let even an outside body coming into the prisons and seeing how the inmates are doing, that would be just randomly show up. That's what needs to be done.
One final question. Have you, you said that when you met ethno-cultural people come to, speak to you, you felt that there was support there, you could learn from them. Do you do any speaking engagements to go out into the community and, speak to young people and just so your experiences and how, how you would have done things differently, how you would have not, like you said, you were foolish. You got involved in crime at the age of 13, 14. They need to hear, the young people need to hear. Do you do that? If not, maybe it's something that you should do.
To be honest with you, it's something I've been thinking about doing. I've been thinking about it for a very long time. However, some of our resources that we have within our community is very limited. I had an issue, for instance, not to get into personal with my problems, but I had an incident and I was looking out for people within my community to help me. And there was nobody. And the frustration, the anger that I had, it was unbelievable. And I wish that we would have a place that we could even have, you know, lawyers, counselors, you know, advocates in one spot that would be able to say, okay, well, this is what's happening within our community, whether it's in the jail system, whether it's even in CAS, if in the school systems, right? Like, it's remember, we get targeted from a young age. Our target comes from school. And then when it comes to school, you become into high school, into your adolescent. And then when you start wearing your pants sagging down and you fit into now a different bracket, right? And then if you get in trouble with the law now, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Cordy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Charles, for telling your story, because it's when we hear the stories from individuals that we know that we have to make recommendations that will make a difference. So thank you very much. And it's nice to see you again, Ms. Brown-Ramsey, after last week. It's nice to have you back again. One of the things that we heard, and last week was my first time ever being in a women's prison or a man's prison the day before. And I have to say, when I was in the solitary confinement area, I just felt such a sense of despair and lack of hope for anybody who would even be in there. Is that what happens when you go in as a prisoner? I mean, I was leaving that day. What happens when you get put in solitary?
It's like, well, firstly, they take out your mattress. They take out, so even if you're confined to having to stay in that room, why would you take out the mattress when I have to lay down? So I'm laying, like, you'd have to lay down on a hard concrete surface, and then you have a little small window, and the room is very tiny. So if you don't pace up and down, it's like you're going crazy. So if they feel like, if you're a troublemaker, let's say you're making noise, you're not going to get a shower. You don't get a shower. But if you're quiet and you don't have anything much to say, you'll be able to get the shower. But it's literally like going crazy. It's like you're going crazy because you're locked up and you can't go anywhere. You're just, it's literally like going crazy. And I had to spend 2 weeks in there. So, and I felt like, okay, like I was going to go nuts.
Because the room wasn't very big.
It wasn't big. And then I never had a mattress. And then they just, like, you can't speak to anybody. And, like, even when I wanted to try to speak, to plead my case, to say that this is not what happened, I couldn't even get to speak to the person in charge. So they shut you down. Like, the guards won't even allow you to go above them, even when you're in there. So you have no hope. There's no humanity. There's no hope. It's nothing. It's like you cannot.
And we heard stories similar to yours about racism within the system. And one of the things that we also heard, because we met with different groups, was that they often felt that one racial or ethnic group was being pitted against another racial or ethnic group. Is that your experience?
And that also goes with the area that you the area that you come with. As I said earlier on, when you get in now, and let's say you're from a certain part of Toronto and the other range is a certain part of Toronto, they know that, okay, well, I've had you before and you're just a troublemaker, so I'm going to put you on this range. And then that's how, and then you end up getting beat up from the people that are in, like, the other prisoners that are there, because you're either not from the area or you've had a problem with them before, and they are all aware of this and they just do it deliberately anyways.
I was struck by one of your comments that you need a break, and I'm sure there are others in your position where you just need a break. Somebody has to give you the opportunity, like the pardon would be an example of giving you the break. So what are we not doing to ensure, and what should we be doing to ensure that people who have been trouble-free for, in your case, 15 years, that how long does it take before you can prove yourself, I guess? Is that
with the pardons, with the parole board?
With the parole board.
With the parole board, if it's a summary convictions, it's, I believe, because they just changed it. They recently just changed it. So now I believe it's like 5 years or something. And I think indictable offenses are like 8 or 10 years, I believe. But that's the rehabilitation in order for you to apply. Now, another thing that's not mentioned in that is that if you get like, let's say, fees, or you have like victim surcharges, and you don't pay those fees, right? By the time you go to apply for your pardon, and you find out that you have to pay for the you have fees, and you pay them, then that 1 year starts from the day that you paid the fees. So you could have no contact with the law for 10 years and had victim surcharges and not be aware of it, or nobody explained these things to you. And then now you go to apply for your pardon, and now you have fees. And I'm saying this because that's what happened to me. And then they wanted to start it from the year from the day I paid the fees, and I went higher and above, and I had to complain. And then that's when they accepted it, because I wouldn't stop at where they told me, oh, we can't. I kept on pushing. I'm like, I was unaware of my fees. What can I do? And if somebody isn't as strong as me, they get stopped and they're going to wait a year, right? I don't know what would be considered a reasonable time to consider somebody to be rehabilitated. But I know that if you're demonstrating yourself within the community and, school and working and things like that, there should be something that should be put in place, even if it's a different category maybe, where you say, okay, yes, you've been in trouble with the law, but you are considered like partial rehabilitated. Something where it at least gives the employers a sense of security to say, okay, well, yes, this person's been in trouble. However, this is what is going on now.
I think
Kim, did
Senator
you have a
Pate had
follow-up?
a supplementary.
Checking it's actually 5 years after summary conviction you'd have to wait.
Yes.
And did you say they made an exception? They gave you a year after victim surcharge
No.
was paid?
No. What had happened was I had to pay fees. And then when you pay your fees, your 1 year starts from the day that you pay the fees. So the 1 year for you to apply for the application goes from the day that you pay the fees. But my years were already up. So when I was trying to apply for my application now, they weren't accepting it because I had fees. But then my year would have started from then, when my year could have started from now.
When you say year, you mean the 5 years?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to be clear.
Thank you. Senator Andrzejczyk, and then Senator Pate.
So many areas we could cover. I see your strength, and you said it would have been good if you had received some information earlier on when you were starting out on a negative behavior, to know what the consequences of a criminal record would be. I've struggled with that. Parents have told me if they're on negative, they don't listen to, this is going to affect you. Was involved with Scared Straight programs where we had lifers come in and talk to young kids to say, don't go the path I took because you're going to end up like me. It worked for a while and it didn't. You've put your life together and you're trying to straighten out. What kinds of programs would work in school? Because it seems counselors, some parents, some NGOs that work in do tell people, young people when they're starting out, don't. But it doesn't resonate any more than when my mother said don't. Okay?
I was just about to say that to you. When me starting out, when my mom was telling me, Natalie, you can't do this. This is going to affect you. I was just like, oh, Mom, like, please just be quiet. You hearing stuff from your parents, it's like, oh, you could shove it under the rug. When you start hearing things from other people, you're still caught up in the life, in that world that you're living in, that what other people are kind of saying to you doesn't matter. But you see, if you had the proper, like, advocacy, where it's like, not to put you on the spot, I'm so sorry. But honestly, like, I met, can I just tell you about Sophie and I?
Sure.
I met Sophie when I was incarcerated. And I was about maybe 15 years old, and I had been sentenced to an open custody. When I went into the open custody, I met Sophie. And at that point, as I told you, my sister was also very young. But the information and the support that I got from Sophie, at that point I knew I did not want to get in trouble anymore. At that point I knew, okay, you know what, there's greater things to me, because she told me. She was pointing things out about me that I didn't know. Up to today, she still does the same thing. I called her just the other day to say, I want to apply for this placement that's in the government. Should I apply? Like, what do I do? And it's support beyond support beyond support. And if there was more agencies or more support systems that were like her or what she has to offer, I think that it would be a lot more effective, where it's not that you're speaking about what you're doing wrong. That's the thing. People are speaking about, you're getting yourself in trouble. This is what you got to do. You're doing this wrong. But you're not speaking about how fabulous I am. You're not speaking about how great I can be. You're not speaking about the fact that I'm this phenomenal person and I can be this person if I just choose to change my life. You're not telling me those things. You're telling me that I'm getting myself in trouble, and you're telling me that you need to change, and you're telling me that you need to do this, but I don't want to do that because you're telling me that I need to. But if you tell me a little bit about myself, and you tell me that, you know what, when the lady told me, the counselor said, you can't be that lawyer. And Sophie used to say, well, yes, you can be that lawyer, and you can be anything that you want to be. I tell my son this every day. I play Les Brown for my son every day. My son is 10 years old, and I let him know, you could probably even be the President of the United States. You can be anything you want. And this is what I tried to instill in his head from a young age, because it wasn't instilled in mine. And my trouble came when my mother met my stepfather, where he wasn't a good fit for my mom, and that's where my problems came, the head clashing came. So when she was to speak to me now, it'd be like, whatever. And then, as I said, when I met Sophie and she was telling me other things about, it was about me. It was about me. That was the difference. And I could make a difference to me. And that's what made me want to change my life. And that's the type of community services or stuff that you guys, support systems you need, is that are more like this, where they genuinely care about our community and individuals, where it's not just about money, or it's not just a show, it's not just a face, it's there.
Thank you. Senator Martin has a supplementary.
I just have one question for Ms. Charles, because I did come a little bit late. I apologize, so I missed your full testimony. But I had been wondering, who is this person next to you, really encouraging you? So again, I missed that, but your explanation clarifies that. But I was also wondering, as you're speaking about, being that advocate yourself, and you're very well spoken, and your honesty, your authenticity comes through so clearly. And whether there might be an opportunity for you to be that person in whatever organization or nonprofit or advocacy work it may be. So you mentioned that you have been thinking about it, but I just sort of see someone who presents so well, and the fact that you have the direct experience, I think your voice will carry such weight. And as I said, I've learned a lot just from the time that you've spoken, and to just encourage you. So it's not so much a question, but more of an observation and encouragement to you, and to thank Sophie for the good work that she is doing as well.
Thank you. Senator Andrew Chuck, did you have another question?
Yes. I dealt with so many young people. The influence was often a boyfriend or a close girlfriend, and the parents were struggling. And as I say, there was less capability of penetrating the good part of you then.
Yeah.
Is part of your success with your mentor here the fact that you'd already experienced a incarceration, a custody, and had experienced that, and that resonated with you, and then along came the right help to get you out of the system? Because one of the things we're looking at is those that are incarcerated, how do you bring them back into society in a positive way? So was your timing the right thing there? Is that part of it? Would you have listened to her as you were starting out, is what I'm really getting.
I actually, when I met Sophie, I was pretty much involved heavily, because I was 15, and about 14, 15 were like the real rough times of my life. But you have to come to a point where you realize within yourself that you want more and you want better. And if you can't analyze that for yourself and figure that out, that's where the problem lies. So it's not only just I got the support, yes, but I had to realize that this wasn't the life for me. I didn't like people telling me to go to sleep. I didn't like people telling me what to do in terms of, you got to go to bed, you can eat now. Now it's time to go back to sleep. And not like, there was just so much more to life than just that. My mom is a single mom. My mom actually worked over 20 years in Revenue Canada. So my mom, I come from, even though she's a single mom, my mom was an amazing woman that worked an amazing job, and she studied. So I grew up seeing that. Now you go from, to me, I grew up in a very good home because she provided like love and, you know, things to me that a mother always does. However, it's just where you have to realize that, okay, I couldn't take my behavior anymore, and like my mom, like I used to see my mom in tears, and my behavior was hurting her. So again, you have to analyze that you either continue doing these things and you're hurting yourself and your loved ones, like my mom, and you know, or change. And when you have somebody that tells you that, okay, you're not just a criminal, you're not just a person that gets in trouble like all the time, and this is what your life is, that you can be more than this, you can be better than this, then it goes, I start looking at my mom studying every day and how tremendous she is, every day suit and tie, like, you know, suit and tie, her suits in her little briefcase bag, pulling and going to work. And I'm like, okay, am I going to be like my mom? Right? Where I'm going to be the successful black woman, or am I going to be like Friends, where you're going nowhere, you're heading down the wrong path? And that's a point where I came when I met you at the open custody, and I was like, okay, this is where I had the right road and I had the left road. So which road are you choosing to go down? And that's where I had to do the balance of the scale. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Pate and then Senator Hartling.
Right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, and nice to see you again. I'm very pleased to welcome you here. Ms. Charles, I just wanted to check, was it federal and provincial custody you were in?
Yes.
Okay, so it was a Grand Valley institution?
It was in Maplehurst. I was out in Maplehurst. First, I was in Vanier, when it was Vanier first, then I was out in Maplehurst.
Okay,
so they had
not
me
in Grand Valley institution.
Yeah, no, they had
So
me.
that would be the provincial corrections?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So does the Ombuds office ever visit there? Because in the provincial corrections, the Ombuds office of each province and territory is supposed to monitor what's happening in corrections. Do they?
I've never seen them.
No. Okay.
Never. And this is actually my first time even hearing that there was an ombudsman of that.
Okay.
So had I known even like back then, I probably would have filed complaints.
Okay. So just in terms of the issues we're predominantly looking at federal custody. And so in the federal system, for instance, there's a correctional investigator that goes in regularly. For women, prisons for women, there are regional advocacy teams that go in, and women in prison who are hired to actually work as advocates. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like there was none of that at to my knowledge, there's still none of that at Vanier and in either the Lindsay jail or the Milton jail or Maplehurst. So
yeah. Sorry, Maplehurst is the Milton.
Yes.
That's the Milton.
Sorry, that's,
yes.
yeah.
Because I know that
there was none of that in there. Okay, that's great. What kinds of recommendations would you make to try and prevent young people from being in the situation you were? I think you've said some of that, and then I want to ask you a bit more about the record process, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. Things to do to prevent. Activities. I would say they closed a lot of community centers. They've after school programs with kids, like extracurricular activities that are within the school programs. Even like I remember going swimming. I remember learning a lot of different things growing up when I went to school in elementary, and they don't have that now. I think if there was some kind of activities and even if, like, when you get to a certain age and like even in high school, you want to know what you want to be. If there were certain things that were put in place to kind of steer you towards that. So if you want to do nursing, there is courses or stuff that you would take that would help you to get to that destination versus, you know, like I think that the counselors or something just needs to be involved where you can get into these children's head at a young age to say, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? What would you like? Like, what sports do you like? Because the thing is that not everybody likes school. Maybe you could be a tradesperson. None of these things are even are even talked about. Okay, well, I know you don't like school. Well, have you thought about doing a trade? And if you don't do school now, you're considered the idiot. Mm-hmm. But it's like, so then you have school. Well, I don't like school. I don't want to do school. So what's my next alternative? Well, then if you don't do school, you're a dropout. Right? There's nothing there that says, well, you know what? If you don't do school, you can do training. You could do skilled working. Nothing there. Mm-hmm. And I think if these things are put in place, especially for kids that know that, okay, I don't like school, for black men especially, little black boys, I don't like school, so I can go do work with my hands. Because I say the same thing to my son. I realize my son doesn't like to read. I'm like, okay, Pops, you know, okay, look, I try to show him other stuff like engineering and like, you know, even like he's into these video games, and I say, you could build a video game, you know. You could be a video game designer, right? Like there's other things that you can do that may not just be that you have to be a doctor or a lawyer. So I think if that was put in place, where they know that they have options, and there's also activities, extracurricular activities, not just only basketball or soccer. There was like other stuff that, you know, that you don't know where your talent is, right? You don't know what you're best at.
So things to encourage young people.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I'm at your disposal because my question is about pardon, so it's not really a supplementary or second. It's do you want me to wait for a second round?
Well, yes.
Okay.
And so we'll go to Senator Hartling, and then we have Senator Martin. I'm not sure if we'll get to a second round at this time, because we have the second panel, but what we're going to do is invite the two of you to stay with us, just in case we have more technical problems. And then and if there's time at the end, we'll do the second round at the end. Okay, Senator Hartling.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome. And Ms. Charles, you are a wonderful speaker. Very motivational to hear you speak, and lots of good energy. And I see Sophie in you. So you're going to be, I'm sure, going to be a great mentor for people. And I just wanted to ask you, just trying to follow the story, what you went through is, were you a parent when you were incarcerated or not?
Well, when I was a young offender,
yes.
I was incarcerated as a young offender.
Yes.
When I got to, I was incarcerated when my daughter was born. Yes, because I was 18. Yes, yes.
Tell me about that. How did you keep the relationship going? How was that?
That's where it was like, it was a little. It was rough because I didn't spend a lot of time in there, which was, thank the Lord for that. Because the gap of the time that I had got in trouble was a bit spaced out. So, as I said, when I met Sophie, I stopped getting into trouble like for a while, and then I got back into trouble again. So when they looked at the time that I didn't get in trouble, I wasn't incarcerated for so long. So they gave me weekends. So I did like my 90 days on the weekends, and that alone was like, okay, I'm not gonna see her now. Like I wouldn't see her Friday evening, and then I had to come back like Monday morning. And like my weekends that was supposed to be like designated for her are now taken away because I have to go to Milton.
So that must have been challenging, and for other mothers, I'm sure there's more women that are parents that are there. So how do you cope with that?
You have to, this is where you become religious.
Okay.
You become religious when you, as I said, there's good and there's bad when I said it earlier on, and this is one of the positives. So you become religious, you start praying, you start seeking the Lord, and you start asking for more strength and guidance. And if I didn't do that, then I don't know, because that's the only thing that I can honestly think of that gave me the strength to be able to cope with that, because it was the hardest thing. I had to leave, depart from her, and know that I'm going in here and I'm locked up now. And then, you know, I wouldn't even call for the weekend because you got to do collect calls, and then your time is like you have like a 15-20 minute or something, and then it cuts off on you, and then I don't want her to hear that. So it was brutal. That one was brutal.
And I know that we've learned in being and visiting some of the institutions that you can't even have computer access, where nowadays when we're away from our family we can do FaceTime and all those things, so you couldn't have that at all, or anything to keep those connections. So I'm sure that was difficult, but
And
now you're with them. And how old is your daughter now?
She's 21.
Oh my gosh, wow.
She's 21. I have a 21-year-old and I have a 10-year-old. He'll be 11 soon. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. I really appreciate you
Thank
coming
you so
here.
much for having me. Thank you.
I actually have a supplemental following Senator Hartling's question. You said this is when you become religious and the whole focus on spirituality. In some instances, we've heard of religious groups that will go into prisons to provide that connection for prisoners. Did you have any of that experience?
I did.
Along the way?
I did.
Can you tell us about that?
Because they come in and they speak, and then you can do like it's like Bible studies kind of, and you can, like, they have a chapel and stuff that you can go to and you can pray. And I did actually. When I was before Vanier became went to Milton, they had their little spot in Brampton, and I was in that one in Brampton, and that's when I would just try. That's when I was in the solitary confinement for so long, and that's when you try. You're trying. Like I prayed. Every day I prayed, because I just, as I said, you're in this little room, you're locked up in the room, and then you start like it just to not make you go crazy, like. You just start to talk to yourself. You start to, I don't know. I started going to the church that was there, because they would do the church and stuff. And I found that was a bit more helpful, because, again, when you hear the word of God, it gives you that power to go on for the week until you can hear it again. And then you get the other set of power again. So it would give me my strength for the week. So that's where I found that I had to go to this church, that I would get my strength from there.
Senator Martin.
My questions are related, and I was going to say I feel that way myself, where, on a weekly basis, just to kind of get the reassurance from the higher place.
Yes.
My question was when you were talking about your son and what you say to him, positive messaging, and it sounds like you have these positive relationships, but I was curious about the impact on the children, maybe long term. And unfortunately we see how sometimes the cycle repeats itself. It's just it's very difficult. So you mentioned that if there were more programs in the communities, in the schools, that really would support the children, not just like for all children, but specifically, for children whose, parent has been, has a record, and who may have been separated from them. So I was just wondering what kind of support, say, your children or children that you're aware of may have while you're in prison. Are there community organizations, and is there any counseling for, specific, like focusing on children of former inmates, because I think that is a very specialized area.
Very important.
Yes.
That's extremely important. And to my knowledge, there is none. And I think that a child should be, I'll just give you a little story. I have my sister's friend, her mother was importing drugs to the States and got arrested in the United States. Now, when she was arrested, everything was here in Canada. So her house, and then she has about, I think, 4 or 5 kids. Now, there was nothing put in place for these children. Nothing that was even there to say, okay, well, your mom even left this amount of money, and you guys need to pay these bills. So, make a long story short, she was sentenced to 5 years, and give or take, came back to Canada and lost everything. Her house, because the kids were young and didn't know how to manage it, everything she lost. And it's not that, but the one child in particular is so mentally distraught that no matter how much I try to speak to her, and I try to reassure her myself too, come on, Chantal, you can do anything that you want. You can go back to school. get your education, do what you got to do. But because of that separation, and she was the youngest, I think she was maybe 15, and she was the youngest, and that affected her. And she's 25 years old now, and she still can't get herself together. So if there was something in place where there was support, or maybe even like caregivers, because if you leave it up to the kids to go there to see them, the child won't do that, right? So you need like a caregiver maybe that can come into the home, right? That can foresee what's going on, like with the child, or even say, okay, I'll be able to delegate this, pay these certain bills to make sure the child even has a roof over their head or food in the fridge, things like that. Maybe even programs where, you can bring the child to see the parent, and maybe it not that be where the parent's behind bars, where it could be a touch visit, right? It doesn't have to be where you're the glass, and because that's a huge effect. That's a huge effect. And, I just pray to God my son doesn't repeat my cycle. Pray to God, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one quick question. And that's just a point of trying to clarify something. In your testimony, Ms. Charles, you talked earlier about a program when you were a young offender. There was a program that was specifically for African Canadians. Was that a program run by the African Canadian Legal Clinic? Or do you recall?
To be quite honest, I was young, so I don't know what program. I believe that it was out of it's like a Lawrence West Community Center. There's a community center that used to be inside of Flemington Park, and there was a lady named Janet, and that was, I can't remember her name, because if I can find her too, she was another Sophie. If I could find her, because I had to, I had to dig for Sophie. I had to dig for Sophie because I was locating her, trying to find her for years. Like, I needed Sophie because there's so many things I was going through, and it's like, where is this lady? And finally I found her. So now I'm like, it's just perfect.
Well, we're very grateful. We'll take a short break here. There's a restroom. We'll take a short break, 3-minute break, and then we'll come back. That'll allow us to transition. Ms. Halfkinney, I'm aware that you're still there, but I think when we transition to the other, we will lose you, but we will be in touch so that we get your evidence as well. Thank you.
I label it racism at the highest because Black and Indigenous women are made to be aware of their position at the bottom of Canada's political, social, and economic hierarchy. Two organizations threw me a lifeline while I was in the institution. One is called Walls to Bridges, which through Wilfrid Laurier University offered 4-credit university courses, and the other one was ODMAX. It's an ethno-cultural support organization that was open to all, but primarily focused on skills building and the bolstering of Black women's self-esteem. I'm currently a part-time student at the University of Toronto and was recently presented with an award from the Bank of Montreal for my exceptional achievement of successfully completing the bridging program with top grades. So that's my testimony.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we'll have questions from senators, and we'll start with Senator Cordy, co-chair.
Thank you very much, and it's always nice to hear somebody who has been through it and totally understands it instead of just reading about it in a book. So we really appreciate what you're saying. You said that the lifeline was Walls to Bridges and ODMAX. So how did they, first of all, if you could explain Walls to Bridges, and we heard about it last week when we were in Kitchener, but if you could explain that to us, how that was helpful for you. And ODMAX, how did they actually create the turning point? How did you tell yourself, I've got to do something, I've got to change? How did that all come about?
Okay, well, what Walls to Bridges does gives us the opportunity to further our education. Like I said, they are 4-credit. So you get the credit for it, the university credit, but it was the pedagogy, circle pedagogy, and it's very interactive. It's not traditional, whereas you have the desks, because I grew up in a traditional classroom setting, and I can tell you, back in the 70s, when I had my experience in the public school system, they would put people that looked like me, usually in the back of the class. Even if you were bright, you sat at the back of the class, or even if you had your hand up, the teacher didn't give a crap. She would usually, or he would usually, answer somebody else's question or their query. So this circle pedagogy, I find, and it's more, we molded off of the Indigenous way of life, way of teaching, way of learning. It's reteaching, it's relearning, where you're not only learning, but you're also teaching too. There's no hierarchy. Everybody is just one, and everyone has a chance for their voice to be heard. So that was Walls to Bridges. And I can go more into detail with it after. Now I want to go into ODMAX. Miss Maxine Telfer came into the institution, basically, I wouldn't say just for the women that look like me, the minority women, but it was open to everyone. But we were more targeted because our needs are different. And so she came in and through her ethnocultural program and found out that our queries, our wants, our needs were not being met. Was being, I don't know if I can say ignored, but we had, for instance, our hair was falling out because we had no proper hair care. In programming, sometimes, sometimes when we would suck our teeth or just say, they would see it as disrespectful. If we called certain women Miss, because that's how we grew up. If we called certain facilitators or certain officers Miss, other ones would see it as a diss. But it wasn't a diss. And sometimes some people, they were more humanistic to us. So we gave them extra respect. We would not be disrespectful, but some people saw it as disrespectful because if we don't want to share something with them because our experiences are totally different, our world is different, and they didn't want to hear about our world, we had no supports, in other words. The parole officers, 99%, they're white. The facilitators is the same thing. The officers is the same thing. So if we have a problem, sometimes it's hard for you to go to someone with a problem who can't understand that problem because they're going to give you some sort of explanation that they took from out of a book, some sort of a remedy that's not going to work for you. And we learned that, so we became our own sisters. We became a community, but we were a community within. Oddmax provided a community without.
We did hear last week when we were in Kitchener, we did hear about the proper hair products and the lack of understanding about how important this was to the prisoners who were there. So thank you for bringing that up again. How did you, you talked about racism within the prison system, and you also spoke about the lack of people that you could seek help from who were black. They were mainly white. So what within you got you to say, I want out of here, I want to do better, I want an education? Was it somebody who helped you? Was it a mentor along the way? Or was it just a personal drive?
And I'd like, sorry to cut you off, I'm sorry.
No,
it was many people, and mind you, I have to let you know also, a lot of them were white. A lot of the most beautiful, understanding people that I met along this journey are white people, but the majority of them were not. And I have a saying, it's not unique to me, but I just take it a little bit further. You walk a mile in my shoe, okay, fine. How's about living a year in my skin? The world would look at you differently, and you would look at the world differently. And that's what they don't understand. And I don't like when people play the race card. I really don't, because sometimes I think it can be used when it's not warranted. But there are times when it's justified, and it's easy for someone to say, that's the race card, I don't want to hear it, blah, blah, blah. When sometimes some people, they just don't want to deal with what they know is true, but they don't want to deal with it, and it's the easiest thing for them to say, just shut up, and they will shut us up because of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Pate.
Yes, thank you very much for your work, and thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Edwards, for your work, and also for congratulations on all of your successes. The success of so many of you who have come through the Walls to Bridges program, I think, is a testament to the value of that program, and the fact that it's the only, the Grand Valley Institution is the only institution, the only prison for women and for men, for that matter, that has that program in it. And it's one of the things where I would like to ask you is, what would you recommend? I think I know the answer, but would you recommend an expansion of the Walls to Bridges programs throughout the country so that other women and men who are in federal penitentiaries would have access to the same sort of university education? And just as a backdrop, Madam Chair, it hasn't been since 1992 that university education was provided in the federal prison system. It was cut out at that time. And so usually people, as we heard at Grand Valley and at Joliet and at other prisons, they have to pay for their own courses. And this initiative, commenced by Dr. Shoshana Pollock, was one of the first is still the only one in the country. And I think Ms. Edwards' success is an incredible testament to that program, as well as her own personal skills and qualities. And I can hardly wait to see where you're going to go in the next few years, Ms. Edwards.
Before you answer, Ms. Edwards, I have a supplemental to that question from Senator Pate, and that is, are the credits from what you've done at Walls to Bridges, are they accepted by the University of Toronto in the program you're doing now? So if you could talk about that bridging too, please. Thank you.
First, to the credits, no. The University of Toronto, they have their own standard. So I had to take the bridging program because of my mother is elderly, and we do live downtown Toronto, and I wanted to be closer to home. So if I wanted to utilize those credits from Wilfrid Laurier, I would have to have done it pretty much at Wilfrid Laurier. I probably could have done it at Ryerson, but through Dr. Simone Davis, she said, you know what? Why don't you take the bridging program and segue into U of T? And that's what I did. I would recommend it to anyone, and I do know that there's a lot of, sometimes I tell people, because I'm very vocal about where I am, because I want to talk, I would like to tell my story rather than somebody tell my story for me. So I let them know where I was, where I am, and where I want to go. Things can change, but I know what I don't want. When I told some people, they say, well, I find it horrible that prisoners can get educated. But when what they don't understand is the chances of recidivism are so low that sometimes it's like, you can say it's almost like none. Because it builds your self-esteem. It gives you a direction. And sometimes, I'm not going to say it's not morals that we didn't have, but sometimes the odds were so stacked up against us that we choose to do the things that are unlawful. Now, I just had an appointment with my parole officer. I see her once per month. I just had an appointment with her. I took the certificate to show her, which I do have it in my bag. You know, I was quite happy. You know, I got this award, blah, blah, blah. She showed no emotion. You know what the woman said to me? She hinted to me, you know, you seem to be a very caring person. Have you ever considered PSW? So when I let her know, because she has a problem with a lot of people coming into this country, she says, getting on welfare and getting ODSP, which I am on ODSP. I said to her, a lot of these foreigners that are coming in, they're more educated than you are. It's just a different culture, and sometimes they're coming from very traumatic experiences. So they were vetted before they even came here. The government is not just going to give them ODSP just because they want to give the money away. There's that prejudice also.
Just want to clarify what ODSP is for people who may not know. ODSP, please, just say what that means.
Ontario Disability, I think it's a support program or supplemental program.
Thank you.
I went into GVI pretty much healthy. I came out with Graves' disease. Graves' disease. I was going to the doctor many times, and they sent me up. Finally, I came out with, you come out usually with no IDs. So think about getting IDs with no IDs. It's the hardest thing, but we manage because you're coming out of there with a sense of strength, because you have to do it. You have to just take everything that you have now, because you're fighting for yourself now. So I kept going back to the clinic, and then they finally sent me to a specialist at Sunnybrook. I went, and the doctor looked after I saw him twice. He was very professional. He never really made eye contact with me. He would just tell me my blood level counts, my blood work, blah, blah, blah. He looked at me one day. He put his pen down. He said, "Why did you let it get to this point?" I said, "Doctor, what are you talking about?" He said, "Why would you suffer yourself? You have Graves' disease. This is a progression. You just don't get Graves' disease overnight." I said, "What is that?" Well, I had an extreme form of thyroidism that it happened at GVI. I would tell them I am not well. I don't feel myself. And they would think it's all psychological. It's because you're here. I'm like, no, I feel it in my body. My mother survives on 4 hours of sleep. My father survives on 4 hours of sleep. I've grown up with my mother working 3 jobs. My father is a professional musician, educated at McGill, at Berkeley. My father, you know what I'm saying? And I'm telling you, I know my family. We're hyperactive. So for me to be feeling this way isn't right. And they would brush me off. And then they started making me think that there was nothing wrong with me. So when I went, the doctor suggested a special program. I went to the program. I completed the program, and they found me fit for ODSP. That's how I got ODSP. So for the parole officer to question the integrity of a medical professional, I burst into tears, and she told me, that's all on you. I said to her, I said, please, miss, have a heart. This is degrading for me. I'm 52 years old, and I got 2 welfare checks in my life, and that's because I transitioned from the halfway house to my mother's home. The first check I got $180. The second check I got $20. I bought a Metro Pass and some food. I wanted off of that thing. I didn't expect to even be on ODSP, but I realized that I was ill. So for someone in the prison, in the penal system, to not listen to me and just blow off what I had to say, I found that highly disrespectful. And me knowing that I'm at the bottom of the rung, I just chose not to argue with this woman, because it's a never-ending story, and I couldn't win her. As a matter of fact, I'm still on paperwork, and just like the GVI, your paperwork follows you. So I'm so mindful of the things that I have to say to this woman. I have to be very careful. She questioned Walster Bridges today, earlier this morning when I went in there to tell her. I didn't even tell her about this meeting, because that would have opened up a can of worms. She's supposed to be my support. I'm supposed to be able to have a rapport with this woman, yet I don't feel comfortable doing it.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Hartley?
Thank you, Ms. Edwards, and congratulations. Despite all the things that you're going through, you're pushing ahead. But the whole question of racism, it sounds like that's a big, big problem. And in the case of the worker that you're talking about, was it a question of racism, do you think, or is it a question of the way people are treated inside the prisons?
Both.
Both. So what can we...
I think they all need courses.
They
all
what?
need programs.
Programs? Okay.
I think they need programs. They need to be re-educated. They need to be relearned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what would be some of the things, if you were the teacher, what would you teach them?
I would teach them, since Canada is supposed to be multicultural and inclusive, that they need to understand, especially some of the older heads. They're not understanding what Canada is supposed to be. They're not getting it. Now, Black and Indigenous populations, I know we're minorities in the whole scope of the population, yet we're terribly overrepresented in the prison system. And there are reasons for that. We don't get up and want to commit crime. And I'm not speaking for the Indigenous community right now. I'm speaking for the Black community. Okay. There are problems. They are. My mother, this is just a personal example. My mother, barely a high school education. My mother can always get a job, always. But look at the type of job she would get. My father, yeah, sure, he had more than that. But he was always the last to be hired and the first to be fired. He up and quit, and that broke my family up. My father just left the country because he said, you can't get a break. I'm the only one in my family with a criminal history. You think I could go and give my mother anything that I stole from the street, or have a dollar that I couldn't account for in her house, or have any type of drug or anything? She pulled me out. They don't stand for it. Yet at the same time, I wanted what my other peers had. My best girlfriends were Yuna Haramatsu, Rosa Novakowski, Kierlyn Greskoviak. We all went the same day to get jobs. We were in high school. We all went. They all got a job. I did not. Rosa would go in late. Yuna would not even show up. And yet their job were still secured. I wouldn't even get a chance in the door. I'm not saying this happens all the time to everyone, but this is what a large portion of us goes through.
So it's not just within the penal system. You're talking about in society in general. It doesn't sound like we've moved very far. And we're celebrating Black History Month, and we need to think about how we can move things forward in 2018. Yeah.
Can I even say, even programs on the show, Kim's Corner, Yes, I like that. Okay, it's a beautiful show and everything else. But if you look at the larger context of how influential my community is in the large scope, yet we don't even, the girl that wrote the show, The Kink in My Hair, I spoke with her on the telephone once. She took off. She went across the border. She says it's too hard. The film board, they don't want to hear our stories. We have some stories. There are so many unsung heroes in the grave right here, people that has contributed all their lives, and they don't even get a pat on their shoulder. If they live to be 80 years old, they might get a letter from Kathleen Wynne or Trudeau saying congratulations on this milestone, but that's about it. They're not recognized. We don't have any. So for these little young boys, sometimes they don't have a role model, so you can see where they're going to go wrong. And their fathers were beaten up on too, so it's like they take off, and their mothers have it hard. You're being a mother and a father to a lot of these people. The young girls, sometimes when I ask them, why are you getting pregnant? Why did you do that? I want something to love, and I want something to love me back. Because society here doesn't love you. I'm 52 years old. I don't even remember when I came here. I have no recollection of Trinidad. When I came here, my brother and I were on the same passport. We didn't even, I don't even know anything about where I came from. I went back to visit. I have family there, and they did not consider me family. They considered me a stranger. So when I came back into the land that groomed me,
Wow. Oh no.
Oh, no.
Oh. Wow.
They will try to reconnect. In the meantime, we'll move forward with the second round with Ms. Charles. So Senator Cordy and Senator Pate. So you're back on, Ms. Charles, for now.
Thank you. And you were just sitting back and enjoying this, weren't you?
She's very animated.
I know. You talked about needing a break when you come out and you are rehabilitated and you want to move on with your life, and it's been 15 years and you've had no problems with the law, but you've got a family, you're getting educated, you want to get a career. So what can we recommend as a committee to give you and people like you a break? People who really want to better themselves.
That's actually a question I would have for you. That's actually the question for you, because it would be where, what could you guys offer to somebody like me, right? Because I don't know what, I understand the powers that some people have, but the thing is that how far are they willing to use, or how far are you willing to go to extend those powers? Because again, there's a lot of people that are willing to help, but then you get stopped at a certain point of helping. So for me, it's like, what are you able to do for us, or for even for me? like what that's the question that I would have for you, to be honest.
So how could we have a Sophie in every committee, in every community?
That would it's to meet more people that are like her, to get maybe to maybe support her organization so that she can expand, so that it would be like a franchise type of a thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Where she can expand and put people that she genuinely knows is are there for the community, are there for people. So if she has people that she recommends, pray to God that they are as genuine as she is and able to help, right? That's the only thing I could think of, really.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Pate.
You talked about the pardon process, and I want to, if you're comfortable, if you could talk a bit about what the actual expense of that ended up being, because many people don't realize now that, one, we don't actually have pardons anymore, it's record suspension, and that the wait time has doubled from what it used to be when it was a pardon process, and the costs has quintupled, and so certainly one of the things that a number of us think, I'll just myself, that I think we should be putting in place, like other countries have, is a process whereby once a certain amount of time is expired, if the person's name pops up and they have not come to the attention of police, they haven't come on CPIC or anything, that they should be able to say they no longer have a criminal record. So a lot of people think it's just the $631 is more than most people's annual disposable income who have records, but many people you then have to apply for fingerprints and all of that. So in the end, do you know how much it costs you in terms of financial and then also time to do your application? Okay,
firstly, it changed within the last, I would say maybe 2 or 3 years, I believe it changed. It was about $150 a few years back, and there was no time limit on when they can get back to you. So that's where you can apply, and you're waiting 5-6 years to hear something back, because they've been backed up with the order or backed up with records from how many years prior, records prior. Now I think it's, as you said, 631. That's just to apply. Now, the fingerprints that are involved, there's numerous things that are involved. You have to do your fingerprints first, and your fingerprints are to be done at your police station, but they get sent off to the RCMP. That's a fee. You have to get a record check, which there's 2 record checks that they want. It's a local police record check, but then there's also a record check that's specified for the record suspension. That's another like $80 for just for the record getting the record suspension, the application for your criminal record for that. After you do that, I think this is the part that was a little more intense, was you have to know every place that you got in trouble. So every region that you got in trouble, you have to go to that region and apply for the transcripts. So if you got in trouble in Peel region or Toronto, Halton region, you have to go to all of those regions, apply for transcripts, where you have to put a $50 deposit down, and it can either be more or less, and you have to pay for those transcripts, and then those transcripts take how much months to get back to you. So you're waiting for you to start your process. I would say to even start it a year in advance to 6 months in advance prior to you even being eligible for your date, because the time that it takes, a month and a half or so for the fingerprints and the mugshots to get back from the RCMP, and then another couple months for them to even get your transcripts, and yeah, you're just running around. And they have this thing called Pardons Canada, but believe it or not, it's just a body, like they're just a face, if you know what I mean. Like, you still have to do all the work on your own. So you're just paying them just for their name, if you know what I mean. It's like their name. You're not really getting any form of help from Pardons Canada. You have to do all the legwork on your own.
So I have a supplementary to that.
So do I.
Oh, okay, you go ahead.
So Pardons Canada is an organization that's been set up that a lot of people think is actually the pardon people, and people end up paying them as well, and can pay over $1,000.
And they're also misleading.
Right.
So they're very misleading. So not only does the name mislead you, because it's Pardons Canada, as it was called before Pardons, so you're assuming it's a part of that. If you Google anything to do with pardons, they are the first people to come up. Secondly, they're over $500 and something just for them to do the application, for them to help you with the application. And then they make it look like we can get it done faster for you, but you can't. So I actually was calling about my fingerprints at the RCMP, trying to inquire what was taking so long. They had my fingerprints for 3 months. And at that point, I was like, well, can I speak to the manager, please? Because I would like to know. I put my stuff in for 3 months ago, and nothing's back yet. And at that point, I was going to do the Pardons Canada, and the lady there said to me, no, you know what, it's better if you do it on your own. You'll save yourself this amount of money. And I did mine on my own. So, like, even with my career, that's a side little job that I would do to help people with their pardon.
Right. And related to in terms of the importance of a pardon, I don't know if it applied to you, and if it's too personal, I don't want you to feel
That's
you
okay.
have to discuss. But for many mums, they cannot volunteer with their kids' teams, their schools.
You cannot.
If they don't have the process. And so they're banned for basically 5 or 10 years from doing anything to do with their children. They can't go on school trips. And so that's something a lot of people don't realize. And the other is sometimes for certain employment, for instance, social work, and many of the professions, any kind of assisting people, so the personal support worker, for instance, you can't even enroll in the program if you don't already have a pardon or a record and actually most of the schools haven't even caught up with record suspension. They require a pardon, so even with a record suspension you cannot apply. Have you had any experience with any of those situations?
Yes. Okay, going back to the school trips, as I said, my daughter's 21. I haven't went on one trip with the actual school. Every trip that I go on, that I do any volunteer, is I drive myself. So you're allowed to attend the trip, but you have to drive yourself. If you want to attend with the students, like with your child on the bus, you have to provide a voluntary, like your criminal record check. You have to do it voluntary. You just say, I don't have a record. That's how I was able to go on trips with my daughter. My son now is, my daughter also got into rugby. And my son does track and field. And my son's extremely, my daughter, with her rugby, she only traveled within Ontario. So I was able to go with her. My son was going out now to the United States. My son was, I think, 7, and he's extremely fast. And I haven't been able to send him. I don't send him, and then because I can't go across the border because of my record, I'm inadmissible. So that has been extremely, extremely hard with that. In terms of employment, that's a nightmare. That's a nightmare all on its own, because every employment application asked if you're bondable. Every employment application asked if you've been convicted of a criminal offense. Now, are you going to lie? To be honest with you, I have. And that's half the jobs that I get, because if I don't lie on the application, I'm not going to get the job. So I lie. So I get into these employment. They don't do a police record check, thank God. But the jobs now that I want now, in detail record check. So I'm stagnant. I came to a halt now, and I'm back at the road, left or right. Which way do I go? Because I'm not gonna allow my record anymore to stop me, to hamper me, to define who I am. It's not me, and I'm not that person anymore. So I'm going to apply for these jobs, and I'm going to be truthful, and I'm going to let them know that I have a record. However, I consider myself bondable. Now, with what you were saying in terms of in other countries, when they have programs that if you haven't been in trouble with the law or CPIC and you haven't been in trouble, you should be deemed rehabilitated. I absolutely agree with you on that, 110%. Because now, let's suppose, as she's on ODSP, how can she afford, besides taking money out of a few checks, let's say, to pay the $631? Now you get this $631, but prior to that, you have all these other things that you need to pay before paying that $631.
Well, and in many provinces and territories, that may be more than you get for even your rent. Which reminds me, have you ever been asked for a criminal record check to rent an apartment? I just went with my son last year to rent an apartment, and he was asked about criminal record check, and I ended up questioning how they could ask that.
You're actually allowed to ask it. You are allowed to ask for any of those things, but I've never been asked for that.
In Ontario,
I've never been asked for that, to be quite honest. I don't rent. I own, so I haven't had to face that, thank God. But it's in the employment aspect, I've been faced with that challenge. Going on trips with my kids, I've been faced with that challenge. Being embarrassed to even tell people. Like I've been battling with myself, getting lack of sleep the last few weeks because of my placement, and just saying, should I come out and tell my placement advisor of what's going on? And again, back to what she was saying about support and about feeling comfortable and about feeling like if I tell her this, is she gonna look at me like this, or is she gonna get me those jobs, or like help me to apply for them? I'm stuck. I'm literally stuck, and I don't know what to do, to be honest with you. I'm finished in April. I have placement in May. I don't hear back from Pardons Canada until, from the parole board until they have until August, the latest. And all I'm doing, again, is I turn religious. And I'm praying to God something pulls through for me to get a placement and my pardon to be accepted and for me to be rehabilitated back into this society.
Thank you very much.
You've spoken it into the universe. And you are sitting beside the most incredible mentor and support person you could ever have.
Definitely.
So that's our list for questions. Ms. Edwards, we're pleased that they were able to get you back. Are there any final comments you want to make to us? And I think you may have been in the middle of talking when the system went down.
There are just so many things that I'd like to say, but I would like to piggyback off of what Natalie said about the jobs. So I registered a company. I swear to God I would not come here and clean for people, but I did. So I registered a cleaning company, and I got a couple jobs. And I decided to be totally honest with them. As soon as I met them, I said, listen, I don't know if you're going to keep me on, but I was charged with so and so and so. I was charged with importing. Now, I don't care what you have in your house. I don't want what you have in your house. Your jewelry, your credit cards, that's not my thing. And the importing was my thing. It is no longer my thing. So I'm doing this cleaning job, and the guy says, okay, can you come 11 till 2? Happily, I did that. Now, what I knew to do was, I said to myself, if I go after 4 sessions, then that means I'm a regular, and I will start paying my taxes, and because he said he's paying me cash. I said, you know what, first couple of times cash, no problem, but I want to pay my taxes and just see if I can build up on this, so that maybe when some of these women come out, when they're finished, then they can help and we can build this thing up, because it's hard for us to get jobs. So I'm doing it. And then I found that he was shortchanging me. So I went back again and again, and he wouldn't give me the proper amount of money. So I said to him, I said, you know what? I just got bold in a nice way. I said, you know what? Maybe you misunderstood me. We made an agreement for such and such a payment. You know what he said? Well, you know what? I'll give you your payment after you work today. I worked like 3 times the amount. I worked like 11 till like 6 that evening. And when I was leaving, he said, I have nothing to give to you. And I said, why are you doing this? He said, you want me to call your parole officer? I said, you want me to call Revenue Canada? So he thought he had something on me, but I could have just flipped it back on him too. But that's the position that we are in sometimes. You're honest, and look at what happens. It's like you can't get a break. I was totally honest with him. He had cameras all over the place. He would turn them on when I got there and leave me alone, let me do my thing. But at the end of the day, he had that in the back of his head. Now he can use this federal inmate. I can use this parolee because I have her. I have her by the short and curly. So I just wanted to just add to what Natalie said. You're caught in between a rock and a hard place. I even had the parole officer say, well, you don't have to necessarily tell them that, you have a criminal record. I said, so are you saying that I must lie? But apart from that, the government offers programs to like 17, 18-year-olds to 29-year-olds. That's it. That's who they cater for. If you're beyond that, you're in trouble, especially if you're beyond that, and maybe a woman that looks like me, we suffer ageism, sexism, and all the other isms and schisms that come along with that. That, again, is going to break down your self-esteem. I know I speak a little bit loud. That's just me. And that was another thing I have to mention back at GVI. Women of color, our tone is usually, it's not the Becky type of voices we don't have. And sometimes we're animated, so we use our hands. And in programs, they saw that as being disrespectful. It's not disrespectful. I can tell by if I use a telephone, if I call Ottawa, for example, or a call center, the tone of the person that picks up the telephone, I can tell what type of person, not in personality, I can tell the features of a person that, it's a black woman because of basically, she doesn't really have the voice like this. So because of that, we get knocked over all over the place. I'm telling you, live a year in our skin, and you will see. I mean, don't mean to be disrespectful, but I don't remember. I don't remember the senator, the African Caribbean. I don't know the black lady right there that's speaking on the panel there, the senator. I am pretty sure. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but you had to be double smart, double tenacious, extremely durable to get to where you are. There's no ordinary woman that look like you that's going to be where you are, miss. And I give you everybody on the board there, everybody on the panel, all the senators, all the women there, I give you all the highest due respect, because I know it was not an easy journey for you. But to be there, coming from the other, you had to go through some extra hoops. You might not want to tell your peers there, but you had to go through some extra hoops, and you know it too.
What can I say to that? Other than to say, I have absolutely walked a mile, lived a year in your life, lived a year in your skin, lived my whole life struggling with the very issues that you've identified. So absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. So my name is Wanda Thomas Bernard from Nova Scotia. So, Miss Edwards, go ahead.
I want to add one more thing. Do I believe in prison? Do I believe in the abolishments of prisons? Absolutely no. I deserved to be where I was. Criminal, yes. I do believe I was supposed to be removed from society, maybe for not the amount of time that I got, and that's another issue. And I also believe that under our Charter of Rights, that forget about the religious part of it, because all the programs are Christian-based, and I saw a lot of the people that did the most praying we're usually the poorest people, and we usually do what we do. We're so thankful for anything. We'll just be happy to thank Jesus for everything, which is good. But I see a lot of people who's never surrendered to the Almighty, and they get up there. They're up there. So what I'm saying is, I think sometimes our rights are violated. Do I believe that I needed to be there? Once again, yes. I take responsibility for what I did. But sometimes, and this is a systemic thing also, you have to look at the person who's sentencing you. Do they take into consideration certain issues? No, they don't, because it's impossible for them, because their life experiences, they come from Mars and we come from Venus. So of course we're going to get the books thrown at us. And what do we have to do? We have to accept it and just write it out and depend on our faith and depend on our supports. And our support sometimes, it's like a recycling door, because our supports, which is sometimes our kids, we are their supports and they are our supports. What happens is they don't have us there, so they fall into the bucket too.
Yes.
They have nowhere to go.
Yes, yes. So, on behalf of the committee, I want to sincerely thank you, Ms. Edwards, and you, Ms. Charles, for your testimony today. It was exceptional to hear from both of you. This is Black History Month, and the theme is Black Canadian women, celebrating strength, courage, and vision. And the two of you have absolutely showed us such incredible strength today. and courage. It takes courage to tell your story. And I know that every time you tell your story, you're reliving some of the trauma that you've experienced. And I also know that the experience of racism, coupled with that intersection of sexism, and we've heard about ageism as well, and disability, that those are everyday realities, and the experiences of those can put you into difficult waters to navigate. You are doing incredibly well. I wish that everyone had a mentor, like the mentor that you have. And Ms. Edwards, I don't know if you can see me, but if you can see that I speak with my hands as well. So thank you. Thank you both very much for your testimony. You've helped us to bring awareness to the realities that Black prisoners face, the barriers that you have to overcome, not just while incarcerated, but actually trying to transition back into community, back into society. So thank you both. I don't think it's the last time I will see either of you. And Ms. Edwards, I hope to meet you in person someday.
Definitely. Thank you all very much for having, oh boy.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. Thank you. Thank you
You're
both
very
very
welcome.
much.
Thank you for listening to my truth.
Thank you for sharing your truth. Senators, before we adjourn, we have a budget before you for the next fiscal year. As you know, we are hoping to travel the week of April 23rd to Edmonton and Vancouver. So I have a proposal that I'll put forward. The question, is it agreed that the special study budget application for public hearings and fact-finding in Edmonton, Vancouver, and Abbotsford on the human rights of prisoners in the federal correction system for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2019 be approved? Oh, question, yes.
I think you put in 6 senators. Is that, is this, perhaps it's for other committees that I'm asking this question. We were always told to put in full committees.
That has changed recently.
Okay,
They've,
so what is the rule then?
To put a more, there's no official ruling, it's just to be realistic with
Realistic, okay,
the
so
amount.
this is the steering committee's realistic.
And it's not meant to exclude
Mm.
if the number changed,
You
having
can
been
go back
served on
to
that
that.
committee, as you well know. If the number were to change from 6 to 7 to 8, you would just go back and they will give you the money. That's
It doesn't have to be done on the chamber floor.
no.
Once this.
It might come back to the chamber floor, I'm not sure, but it's not meant to. I know in the past, and the reason that we got into saying that everybody should be down was because some committees were saying, well, we only want 4 to go. Well, who chooses? So this way, it's 6. There were 4 who went to Toronto. I don't know how many are going to Nova Scotia, but
It's very difficult with
yeah, it is
Some
with
of us
other
are having
committees.
more trouble.
Yeah.
The point I used to make when we had to put all of them in was that often that's what the press picked up is our global budget, but they never looked at what we actually spent, which was the realistic. I have no problem with that, providing going back doesn't mean that you have to do something heroic to put the members back on. And so thank you for that. Okay.
So is it agreed that we approve the budget, or are there any other questions? So it's agreed, okay. Is it also agreed that the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure be authorized to approve the final version of the budget and for the chair to submit to the Standing Committee on Internal Economy, Budgets and Administration? Agreed. Thank you all very much. I declare the meeting ended.